Hi, good afternoon. Well, actually, yeah, it's good afternoon. And as you can see, I'm in my office. I still had some trouble at home. I don't know what the problem was. It wouldn't upload, so I just figured I'd come on into the office and shoot it again or video it again and then upload it for you so you'd have it for today, tomorrow, the weekend, so you can prepare for your quiz on Monday. So I got emails from some of you stating that it cut off after 15 minutes. Hopefully you heard me say something about the fact that my battery was dying and I was going to go ahead and try to connect it. Hopefully you got the last information. I only went over the three rickettsias: Rickettsia prowazekii, Rickettsia rickettsii, and Rickettsia typhi. So you should have heard about the Rickettsia prowazekii and the two eyes at the end. So that was epidemic typhus, while Rickettsia typhi only has the one eye, so that's endemic typhus. And then Rick the tick for Rickettsia rickettsii. And I gave you a couple of other not so scientific ways of knowing the characteristic rashes. So those were the only three that I actually got to cover. There is one other rickettsial disease that's caused by Coxiella burnetii that's referred to as Q fever. The Q is in regard to the fact that it was like a question in regard to what was causing the disease, and so the Q is for query, and it actually occurred in Queensland, Australia, and it was a disease that was caused by ticks. So once again, we have another biological vector that we need to know in regard to the rickettsial diseases. So there are four microorganisms that you need to know, but three actually have the first name of rickettsia. The last one, Coxiella burnetii. So that's the end of the rickettsias. And then the only thing that I need to cover now would be the chlamydial diseases. Remember, the first disease that I actually went over in the previous video presentation was Mycoplasma pneumoniae, and I was able to get completely through that one. So make sure you go back and review Mycoplasma. That's one note card. Mycoplasma, then the three ricketsias and Coxiella burnetii. That's 5 note cards. And then, and I'm just looking at the PowerPoint presentation right now, we get to, because the Q fever is on the bottom of page 378 and 379, and then we get into the chlamydial diseases. Now, when we hear chlamydia, if you're like many of us, the immediate thing that you think about is a sexually transmitted disease. And yes, that is accurate. And it's actually caused by Chlamydia trachomatis. Now, Chlamydia trachomatis has different pathogenicities. So for each pathogenicity that you have for Chlamydia trachomatis, you'll need a different note card. If you're looking at your PowerPoint presentation, you will note that the first chlamydial disease is called Chlamydia psittaci. The P is silent. And the P in the species name should give you a hint in regard to what causes a disease called psittacosis. So the PSITTACI, the PSI should kind of lend itself to psittacosis since it's psittaci. And the P would also give you the indication that it's referred to as parrot fever. Well, then if we think about that name, then we would know that a parrot is an animal, so therefore it is a disease that is zoonotic, obviously, because it's transmitted either through the feathers, as the birds, and birds are nasty. Oh my gosh. I mean, they're pretty and all, but when they flap their wings, and because they excrete their fecal matter right into the cage in which they are, if it's a very small cage, when they flap, all of that kind of gets into the air. So this microorganism very easily is transmitted, and you can get it by inhalation. So if you look in the textbook under parrot fever, that's on page 380, and it's at the bottom, and it only has a couple of paragraphs about it. Ornithosis is another name for it. So Chlamydia psittaci causes parrot fever, psittacosis, or ornithosis. All three of those are synonymous. And it talks about the fact that it can be contracted from pigeons, chickens, turkey, just basically any type of fowl. And you can contract it if you should work in an environment in which you are taking care of those animals. And it tells you in the second paragraph that chlamydia psittaceae is spread to humans by inhaling the aerosol microbes from bird droppings. So that's when they're all in those cages together and they're flapping around all those droppings, and the microorganism becomes airborne. And if you are working with them, if you're the person in the pet shop that has been designated to work in the bird area, and any of the birds become infected with psittacosis, then you're susceptible to it as well. And, and additionally, should this be in, at the bottom of the paragraph, it talks about the fact that if it's in buildings with ventilation, that it could travel through the buildings. Now, typically, pet stores, from what I can see thus far, I mean, well, PetSmart typically is attached to something, but many of them are standalone. But those that might actually be in malls, which there are, should there be birds that become infected, it can actually travel through the ventilation system and not only affect the pet store, but any other stores that have that same ventilation system as well. So that's chlamydia psittaceae. Now, the other one is the one that we're a little bit more familiar with, and that's chlamydia trachomatis. Well, you will note that for chlamydia trachomatis in your PowerPoint presentation, there are 3 different pathogenicities. So you will need 3 different note cards, and those pathogenicities include, and I'm just looking back here so I can see it, chlamydia trachomatis that causes trachoma. Well, that one kind of lends itself to its name. Chlamydia lymphogranuloma venereum. That should be a clue. And then we have chlamydia trachomatis and the pathogenicity being non-gonococcal urethritis, which would be NGU, and then NSU, non-specific urethritis. Okay, so let's go back to chlamydia trachoma for trachomatis. I think I mentioned this one day in class when we were talking about conjunctivitis and pink eye, and you should go back and recall which one of the groups, the bacterial groups, caused another type of conjunctivitis. Hint, hint. I'm just saying. So anyway, this particular type of conjunctivitis is more virulent. It can lead to blindness if left untreated, and that is referred to as inclusion conjunctivitis. And if you look in your textbook, still on page 380, and at the bottom of the first paragraph, says conjunctivitis is an inflammatory condition the membrane that surrounds the eye. The organism is spread from person to person. Now we know that. We know how contagious and infectious conjunctivitis is, and we've talked about that before. Pretty much it's the same thing with chlamydia trachoma. It's just that it's a more severe form of conjunctivitis that can be contracted. And it says it's most frequently reported infectious disease in the United States, the sexually transmitted disease lymphogranuloma, and it goes on to talk about the other 2. But once again, it's very easily passed person to person, direct contact, or it can also be indirect contact by fomites. Remember we talked about the flying fomites, the flying ones that catch the ball, rub the eyes, everybody in the class gets it. So chlamydia trachoma or trachomatis that causes trachoma is inclusion conjunctivitis. All right, next. The next 2 lend themselves exactly to what they are. Chlamydia trachomatis that leads to lymphogranuloma venereum is a venereal disease. The species name tells you that. So since that is the case, it must be direct sexual contact. And lymphogranuloma venereum, in addition to that, it's portal of entry and exit. Well, we can figure that one out as well if it's direct sexual contact. And in the second paragraph, it tells you about the time of exposure and how long it takes to appear or for the person to become symptomatic. I'm not so much concerned that you know about that as much as I am that you know the pathogenicity, portals of entry and exit, so on and so forth. Oh, but there is one word in that second paragraph that you should know the meaning of, and it's about halfway down, and it says in 1 to 8 weeks time period not required. The regional lymph nodes enlarge and become suppurative. Suppurative. That is a word that we've talked about before. We said that it means it has the ability to form pus. We also refer that to be purulent. Pyo also means pus. So please make sure that you're familiar with what that word means. And then the final pathogenicity, the NGU, non-gonococcal urethritis or non-specific urethritis, they both also lend themselves to the name, to what it is that they cause. The portal of entry and exit, genitourinary. The mode of transmission, direct sexual contact. And at the bottom paragraph, it talks a little bit more about the fact that any of these chlamydia, the direct sexual contact and venereal diseases, it can lead to pelvic inflammatory diseases in young women. And the thing about chlamydia is that it's asymptomatic in men. So men can transmit it from one female to another, and he's asymptomatic, but the symptoms would first show in her. So that's something to be cognizant of. Well, that's my time. So make sure you study chapter 26. It's not that much to it. You don't have that many note cards. You should have a total of, let's see, one for mycoplasma pneumoniae, one for Rickettsia prausnickii, Rickettsia typhi, as well as Coxiella burnetii, one for Chlamydia trachomatis for oranthosis, and then another 3 for Chlamydia trachomatis for trachoma, NGU and SU, and also lymphogranuloma venereum. So I'll be looking for those note cards on Monday. I will also give you back your note cards from the previous week so that you'll have those to study from as well. And we'll continue moving on through there. So I hope you have a wonderful weekend. I'll see everybody on Monday. Bye.